You start, then stop. You replay the line, the meeting, the what if, until the scene fractures and you can't tell which part was real. That loop feels like work. It feels like strategy. You tell yourself you're mining for insight, but what you're really doing is running the same footage through hope and worry, trying to extract safety from rehearsal. This video doesn't flatter that habit. It calls it what it is: anxiety pretending to be intelligence. Here's the first, blunt observation. Looping produces no new information. You revisit the same detail, the same tone, the same imagined ending, and you come away with the same incomplete answer. Only now you're more exhausted. The pattern gives you the illusion of control. You believe more thought equals better outcomes. But your thinking is circling around feeling, not solving it. You keep asking the brain to do a job it wasn't designed to do alone. Thought without emotional resolution is just motion. It isn't progress. You're not failing because you think too much. You're failing because the thinking doesn't integrate how you feel. That distinction matters. Once, repeatedly running scenarios bought you safety. It helped you prepare for real threats. Now it feels automatic, like a muscle memory that drains trust. Trust in decisions, trust in relationships, trust in yourself. The loop protects from unknowns by refusing commitment, but this safety it offers is bankruptcy. Less energy, less clarity, less willingness to act. Early in this series, I'm making a promise. By the end, you'll see why those thoughts never resolve and why you keep returning to them. We'll cut through the cleverness. Minute by minute, we'll turn assumptions, demonstrate the core error, and show how circular thinking is avoidance wearing a control mask. For now, notice one recurring thought that comes back like a stuck song. Name it in your head. Before you go, leave one quick comment. What is that recurring thought? Type it below. No explanation needed. Be curious about why it persists. In the next video, we'll reveal why your mind prefers looping to choosing, and why breaking that loop feels so dangerous. You tell yourself you're thorough. You replay the line, the meeting, the what if, because details matter, because missing one fact could change everything. That belief feels smart. It feels like preparation. But take a step back. The loop rarely finds new facts. It recirculates the same fragments dressed in fresher language. What looks like depth is often motion without progress. Watch how this works in real time. Minute 1. You analyze the words for meaning. Flip, meaning stays ambiguous. Minute 2. You rerun the tone and the gap between sentences. Flip, tone confirms nothing. Minute 3. You imagine a different reaction, then rewind to the original. Flip, no evidence appears to settle the doubt. Each microturn promises clarification and delivers only another reason to keep turning. This is the pattern of avoidance wearing control's mask. You're not rehearsing. You're avoiding the discomfort of an unresolved emotion. Anxiety offers a counterfeit currency, looped thinking, to buy the feeling of safety. It's persuasive because thinking is something you can do. Feeling is something you must tolerate. The core error isn't too much thought. It's thinking without emotional resolution. You treat thought as if it were a tool for closure, when actually it's a way to postpone the unpleasant work that would actually change the loop. You used this mechanism before, and it saved you. When uncertainty meant real danger, circling kept you alert. Today, the stakes are different, but the pattern persists, draining trust in your own decisions and exhausting your energy. That's the real cost. You aren't deepening insight. You're buying time from yourself. Here's a practical shift. Clarity follows emotional safety, not the other way around. You don't think your way into calm. You create conditions for calm, then choose. So right now, notice one recurring thought you return to, one that never gives relief. Hold it up and name it. Curious what makes your mind prefer the loop over a choice? Drop that recurring thought in the comments, briefly, and in the next video we'll reveal why your brain clings to looping and why breaking it feels so dangerous. You tell yourself you're doing work. You replay the line, the meeting, the phrasing, sometimes out loud, often in that private, looping voice, and label it analysis. It feels active, it feels useful. Walk far enough in that circle, and you start believing you've moved. But the truth is blunt. Replaying doesn't produce new information. It produces the illusion of control. Watch how your mind stages microturns every few breaths. Minute 1. If I rehearse, I won't be surprised. Flip. Rehearsal gives you fewer surprises, but more stuckness. Minute 2. I can think my way to certainty. Flip. Thought rearranges memory, not outcome. Minute 3. I'm solving the problem. Flip. No new data, just emotional reheating. Each flip isn't a failure of will. It's evidence that looping wears the outfit of competence while it's actually avoidance posing as strategy. Here's the core error, plain and uncompromising. You're not failing because you think too much. You're failing because you think without resolving the emotion attached to the thought. You treat cognition as if it's a toolkit that can tighten the wobble inside you. But tools don't heal the tremor, they only measure it. When the underlying fear, shame, or uncertainty remains unaddressed, every round of thinking simply circles the same ground and feels like progress without producing relief. That difference between intellectual resolution and emotional safety is everything. Emotional safety is what actually changes how you make decisions, how you speak, how you sleep. Thought without that safety is rehearsal without rehearsal's benefit. It reduces nothing. It only prolongs the sense that something must still be fixed. Right now, pause. Pick one recurring thought that never leads to relief. One you catch returning 3 or more times. Name it to yourself. How does it land in your body? Where does it tighten? Write that thought in the comments. Be specific. Curiosity is the first move toward change. In the next video, we'll explain why your brain prefers the loop to a choice, and why breaking that loop feels not just hard, but dangerous. Stay with this. The next step reframes the threat you've been protecting against. You tell yourself you're being thorough. You go over the line, the meeting, the text, again, because intelligence looks a lot like preparedness. But the truth is sharper. Repetition is buying a feeling, not information. Each replay gives you the illusion of progress while leaving the raw feeling, unease, shame, uncertainty, untouched. You think you're solving, you're rehearsing safety. Pause and look closely at what happens when you loop. At first it feels focused. You notice details, you refine phrasing, you predict outcomes. 1 minute later you're arguing with an imagined reply. You flip from calm to blame in seconds. That micro-turn, the tiny assumption switch, is the engine of the loop. It creates so many slightly different scenarios that you mistake quantity for clarity. More variance, same lack of resolution. Why? Because the loop's job isn't problem solving. Its job is avoidance. Anxiety is buying time. It manufactures options so you don't have to land on one. Control's mask looks reasonable. If you cover every possibility, you're safe. But safety requires an emotional answer, not more scenarios. Thinking without feeling is like drafting plans for a city you've already fled, meticulous maps that don't build bridges back to the place you need to be. This is the core error. You conflate cognitive work with emotional closure. You believe thinking will neutralize the heat of the feeling. It doesn't. Emotions stubbornly demand acknowledgement, not more analysis. You can annotate a fear into exhaustion, but you can't overwrite it. So here's a simple experiment. Choose one recurring thought, the one that circles the loudest. Notice it for 1 minute. Don't solve it, label it. Ask what emotion rides with it. That small shift, attending to the feeling instead of expanding the scenario, begins to unhook the loop. I want you to leave a comment. What single thought keeps playing on repeat for you? Share one line. Curiosity fuels clarity, so post it below. In the next video, we'll expose why your mind prefers looping to choosing, and why breaking that loop feels so dangerously necessary. Stay with that question. You tell yourself you're being thorough. You replay the line, the meeting, the half-finished text like it's evidence that more thought will produce a different outcome. But what you're mistaking for depth is rehearsal without consequence. Each pass through the memory looks like progress because you catch another detail, a new angle, but you don't change the facts, you only relive them. That's the difference between thinking to understand and thinking to avoid. Here's the key. Your brain is trying to buy safety. Uncertainty registers as threat. The loop is a cheap, repeatable strategy that keeps you occupied while the real work, feeling the discomfort and updating what you believe about yourself and the situation, gets postponed. You switch assumptions every minute. Maybe they meant it, maybe they didn't. Maybe you blew it, maybe you didn't. Those microturns feel smart because they create movement, but they are movement without direction. You're expending mental energy while the emotional conclusion you need is still pending. Thinking without emotional resolution is like inspecting a locked door while refusing to turn the knob. You gather scenarios, play outcomes, polish arguments. None of it forces the door or tells you what's behind it. Emotional data is the part that updates your predictive model. Without it, your cognition keeps spinning on the same groove because the system hasn't registered a change in safety. The loop's productivity is an illusion. You're busy, not wiser. So what breaks the cycle? Not more thought, not better planning. You start by naming one recurring thought, the specific line or replay you return to most often, and noticing what feeling surfaces when it arrives. That naming is a micro-intervention. It draws attention to the emotional residue you've been avoiding. It doesn't solve the problem, but it stops the automatic rerun long enough for something else, an action, a conversation, a boundary, to be considered. Now pause and look inward. What is that one thought you keep playing on loop? Write it down or drop it in the comments. In the next video, we'll explain why your mind prefers looping to choosing, and why breaking that loop can feel, at first, dangerously impossible. You can feel the motion before the content, the rewind, the slow-motion critique, the 15-second argument that reruns in your head like a broken clip. You tell yourself you're being thorough, that this replay will catch what you missed and turn uncertainty into certainty. But if you look closely, there's no new data arriving. Only the same thought, worn thinner. That's the critical point. Looping impersonates problem-solving while it's actually stall tactics dressed as diligence. Start small. Pick one recurring thought, the line you always replay after a meeting, the what if you circle before sleep. Give it 60 seconds. Track its movement. Where does it go first? Does it hunt for a hole in your memory, an imagined insult, a detail you could have said better? Notice the feeling underneath. Is it fear, shame, the urge to fix something you can't control? That feeling is the engine. The thought itself is not the solution, it's the symptom. Here's the error you trust. You assume clarity comes from more thought. You pile scenarios on scenarios, convinced one more angle will produce an answer. But clarity doesn't arrive because the emotional groove, the place the thought is trying to soothe, hasn't been acknowledged. You are using thought to buy the sense of safety you actually need emotionally. When thought tries to substitute for resolution, it keeps looping because the underlying signal remains unaddressed. Microturns help you test this. Every minute, flip an assumption. Maybe I don't have to fix this now. Maybe silence doesn't equal rejection. These are not forced optimistic lies. They're experiments that expose which moves are information-seeking and which are avoidance. If a flip changes nothing, you're still circling. If a flip stops the loop, you've found an emotional knot to untie. Curious why your brain prefers replaying over choosing? Comment below with one recurring thought and the feeling it leaves you with. Not the situation, the sensation. In the next video, we'll reveal why your mind clings to looping and why stepping out of it can feel like risking everything. You tell yourself replaying is evidence you're thorough, proof you won't miss anything. But watch it closely. The sequence never expands, it only repeats. You loop the same line, the same gesture, the same, if only, until every detail looks like a clue. That feeling of cleverness? It's a cover. Anxiety is buying an illusion of safety by turning the same key in the same lock. Imagine walking the same path in a park, faster each time, insisting you're getting somewhere. The scenery doesn't change. The only thing different is your breath, shallower, more urgent. That's the core error. You think more thought equals more insight. What you're missing is emotional resolution. Thought without feeling is rehearsal without rehearsal value. You keep trying to solve a problem that exists as a charged sensation in your body, not as a data gap your intellect can fill. Now flip assumptions, briefly, purposefully. Every minute you tell yourself the loop is preparation. Ask, does it generate new options or just make you feel temporarily safer? You'll notice the answer shifts the moment you track the sensation under the thought, tightness in your chest, a dragging towards certainty. Next minute, you tell yourself stopping is reckless, then test that assumption. What really happens when you let the loop go for 5 breath cycles? Often, the acute urge eases. Another flip, you call this rumination analysis, then observe that analysis usually changes something. This doesn't. So what's the alternative? Reframe action. Clarity follows emotional safety, not the other way around. You don't need a perfect plan to feel steady. You need to name the feeling, breathe into it. and let the body register that you're still okay. That reduction in charge opens the mind to new, practical moves you can actually take. Right now, notice one recurring thought you can't seem to resolve. Stay with it, without trying to fix it, and name the sensation it brings. Curious how your brain prefers looping to choosing? Leave a short comment naming that thought. And in the next video, we'll reveal why your mind favors the loop and why breaking it can feel more dangerous than it actually is. You tell yourself you're being thorough. You rehearse the phrase you didn't say, run the meeting again, play every possible reaction until your head feels crowded. Each replay feels like data gathering, like you're mapping territory. But look closer. Those micro-turns, those minute-by-minute flips where you test a different explanation, a different response, don't produce new information. They only produce variations of the same worry. Why? Because each loop is a safety test dressed up as strategy. You cycle through scenarios not to prepare for reality, but to postpone a feeling, uncertainty, shame, fear of being wrong. That's the critical error. Thinking keeps happening, but emotional resolution does not. You analyze words, logistics, timelines. You don't process the ache that makes you reach for the analysis in the first place. So the same thought comes back, sharper and more insistent, as if you could finally outsmart the discomfort by outthinking it. This matters because the cost isn't just time. Looping erodes trust in your own judgment. It lowers your tolerance for ambiguity. You end up confusing movement with progress. More thoughts, less peace. Each micro-turn gives you a temporary illusion of control. If I think hard enough, I'll catch everything. But that illusion is brittle. It never seals the uncertainty that actually needs tending. Try this now, quietly, without solving anything. Name one recurring thought that never brings you relief. It might be a line you wish you'd said, a decision you keep second-guessing, a text you can't stop rereading. Write it down or state it to yourself. Notice how immediate the urge is to spin off into 5 alternatives, and how little that urge soothes the original sting. If you're still convinced looping is useful, that's precisely the point. Your mind prefers the familiar rehearsal because it feels safer than the unknown of a felt emotion. In the next video, we'll unpack why your brain clings to that loop, and why breaking it feels like risking everything you've been clinging to. Share the thought you named below. What keeps bringing you back? You tell yourself you're being thorough. You replay the line, the meeting, the decision as if each pass will excavate some missed fact that finally settles you. But what you're really doing is trading the unknown for a ritual, one that feels clever because it's precise, but that never changes the outcome. The loop's appeal is simple. It creates motion. Motion masquerades as progress. Look at the pattern. Anxiety nudges you with a cue, a memory, a text, a gut tightening. You engage. You review the sequence, adjust assumptions, imagine responses. Every iteration flips a tiny assumption. Micro-turns that feel smart because they generate new permutations. Minute 1, maybe you misread them. Minute 2, maybe you were too blunt. Minute 3, maybe they'll leave. Each flip gives the illusion of gathering information, but you're only reshuffling the same elements. None of those permutations includes new emotional data. You haven't tested your fear, you've only rehearsed it. That omission is the core error. Thinking without emotional resolution is like reading a map while refusing to step outside. You can plot every route and still never arrive. Your nervous system is asking for safety, feedback that you're okay, and looping doesn't provide it. Instead, the loop purchases a counterfeit reward, reduced immediate uncertainty, a brief drop in panic that reinforces the habit. When the drop fades, you start again, convinced more thinking will finally feel like enough. So here's the practical place to start. Choose one recurring thought, the exact sentence that replays most often, and for the next hour, notice it without trying to fix it. Record the emotion that rises, the physical sensations, and the impulse that follows. Don't argue with the thought. Observe its choreography. That tiny interruption, awareness without action, uncovers what the loop is shielding you from. If this landed on you, say which thought keeps looping and how it shows up in your day. Your comment becomes the map for the next step. In the next video, we'll explain why your mind prefers looping over choosing, and why stepping out of that loop feels so dangerous. You tell yourself thinking is the tool that will finally make this right. You replay the meeting, the text you should have sent, the phrase you wish you'd said, and each rotation feels like progress until it doesn't. At this stage, the useful fiction fractures. Looping isn't gathering new data. It's repeating old noise while your sense of urgency buys the illusion of control. Look closely. Each loop is a micro-behavior that serves one job: reduce emotional uncertainty. You interpret that reduction as information gathering, because information feels safer than feeling. But safety achieved by running scenarios is shallow. The loop gives you temporary calm, then hands you the same unresolved knot. Emotionally, nothing changes. You've only practiced the same worry in higher resolution. Flip the assumptions, briefly, deliberately, every minute. What if this replay didn't help you prepare, but kept you from acting? What if the clarity you crave actually arrives after a different kind of work, not more thought? These micro-turns expose the core mistake. You're treating cognition like a substitute for emotional processing. Thinking without addressing the feeling that fuels it is a treadmill disguised as a path forward. That distinction matters because it changes your move. Clarity doesn't precede emotional safety. It follows from it. You can't outthink the loop into resolution. Instead, you can practice small experiments that create enough emotional steadiness to make choices. This isn't optimistic fluff. It's a strategic reallocation of effort. What would you do if you spent 5 minutes naming the feeling behind the thought rather than spinning the scenario for another hour? What if you tested one tiny action that would reveal new information instead of rehearsing every contingency? Right now, pick one recurring thought you keep returning to. Don't try to solve it. Just notice it and name the feeling underneath for 30 seconds. Drop a comment with that single thought. That small act of noticing starts a different feedback loop, one that can change patterns. Next video will explain why your mind defaults to looping, why it feels safer than choosing, and why breaking that habit often feels terrifying. Good? Comment below and prepare to be surprised. You tell yourself you're being thorough. You replay the line, the meeting, the text, convinced that turning it over will mine a new angle, a new solution. But analytically, that pattern looks less like inquiry and more like a loop with a shimmer. It feels useful because it masks your uncertainty, not because it produces answers. Every minute you spend circling the same detail, your brain rewards a tiny hit of predictability. You feel a flicker of control, so you keep going. Micro-turns, the small reframes you let yourself make every few moments, give you the illusion of progress. Flip one assumption, then another. Each flip feels clever, yet the facts don't change. The emotion under the thought stays put. That's the core error. You're thinking without resolving the feeling that sparked the thought in the first place. Thinking becomes a sedative, not a solution. Frame it this way. Repetition buys you a temporarily manageable mental state, not clarity. You're effectively doing reconnaissance around a problem you won't engage with. The work of thinking is generous and powerful when it's coupled with emotional calibration. Alone, it's endurance training for anxiety. You rehearse outcomes to postpone the discomfort of choosing, and you mistake rehearsal for preparation. So here's a practical pivot. Notice one recurring thought you visit when you feel unsettled. Don't try to solve it. Name it. Observe its texture. Does it chase you like an unfinished sentence? Does it end in what if, or if only? That single act of noticing shifts the relationship you have with the loop. It exposes the pattern. The thought is not a door to truth. It's a holding room for feeling. I want you to be curious about this. What one thought do you return to that never actually helps? Drop it in the comments. Brief, honest. How does it leave you when it finally fades, if it ever does? Next, we'll get into why your mind prefers looping over choosing, and why breaking that loop often feels like stepping off a cliff. By now you can see the blunt truth. Rewinding the same conversation doesn't make you smarter about it. It keeps you safe from feeling. Looping feels like work because it looks like work. You inspect lines, scenarios, and micro-decisions as if gathering evidence. But evidence for what? The loop never resolves because it doesn't invite the one thing thinking alone can't deliver: emotional resolution. You're not stuck because you lack options. You're stuck because your mind is avoiding the emotional cost of choosing. That avoidance wears the outfit of control. It manufactures hypotheses and what-ifs so you can stay in rehearsal instead of stepping onto the stage. Worst of all, the rehearsal gives you the illusion of progress. You feel busy, clever, painstaking, and all the while the real feelings, fear, shame, vulnerability, sit unprocessed behind the scenes, quietly steering you back to the loop. The cognitive work never produces new data about the underlying emotion, so the same thoughts circle again and again. That's the core error, thinking without addressing feeling. So here is a concrete, minimal task before you close this video. Pick the single recurring thought you replay most. Name it aloud. Then name the feeling that accompanies it. Not the story, the feeling. Is it dread? Embarrassment? The hollow ache of uncertainty? Naming is not solving, but it's an act that pulls the loop into the light. Once visible, you can start to test small actions that target the feeling rather than the thought. A short conversation, a boundary, a tiny experiment that costs less than the endless rerun. You're invited to be curious. What one thought do you catch yourself replaying every week? Drop a brief comment naming that thought and the feeling attached. We'll read them. In the next video, we'll go deeper. Why your brain prefers the loop, why breaking it feels like risking safety and identity, and what specific, low-risk moves actually rewire that pattern. That's the part most people skip, and it's precisely why you keep returning to the same, exhausted script.